The silence was the worst part. Space was silent, but it was a sterile, suspended kind of nothingness. This silence was heavy. It had weight. It pressed against the hull of the N-1 starfighter with the density of a suffocating blanket. Inside the cockpit, the Razor Crest's replacement was screaming in lights, if not in sound. Red warning glyphs strobed across the dashboard, washing the silver Beskar of the Hunter's gauntlets in the bloody hue of catastrophic failure. He didn't move, not yet. He sat strapped into the pilot's harness, listening to the cooling tick-tick-tick of the sublight engines dying beneath him. His head pounded, a dull throb sinking with the auxiliary power unit's struggle to restart. He flipped a toggle switch. Nothing. He tried the repulsor lift ignition. A wet, grinding cough echoed through the ship's frame. Then death. "Dank, Farek," he whispered. The modulator in his helmet stripped the frustration from his voice, leaving only static. He released the harness. The clasps sprang open with a sharp metallic snap that sounded too loud in the dead ship. He reached for the manual release of the canopy. It was jammed. With a grunt of exertion that fogged his visor for a microsecond, he braced his shoulder against the transparasteel and shoved. It gave way with a screech of tearing metal. The air that rushed in didn't smell like air. It smelled like copper and sulfur, like a battery that had burst and leaked its acid over dry soil. The Hunter stood in the cockpit, his boots crunching on shattered glass, and looked out. He had crashed in a hellscape. The sky was a bruised, sickly yellow, churning with low-hanging clouds that seemed to glow with an inner malignant phosphorescence. There was no horizon, only a thick soup-like fog that obscured everything beyond 100 meters. The ground was not soil, but a fused, glassy crust of shattered earth, punctuated by the skeletal remains of trees that looked like clawed hands reaching for a mercy that would never come. And then the sound began. It started as a low crackle in his audio receptors, distinct from the wind. Click, 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 click. The heads-up display inside his T-visor flared with a new warning, one he hadn't seen since the purge of Mandalore. A jagged yellow bar began to rise on the right side of his vision. Radiation detected. Atmospheric toxicity critical. R2, he called out, habit overriding the reality of his solitude. The droid socket behind him was empty. The astromech had been left on Navarro for repairs. He was alone. He vaulted over the side of the cockpit, landing in the ash with a heavy thud. The gravity was standard, perhaps 0.9 Gs, but he felt heavier. The suit felt heavier. He checked his wrist gauntlet. The atmospherics gauge was redlining. This wasn't just a hazardous environment, it was an execution chamber. He walked around the nose of the starfighter. The sleek chrome, usually a mirror for the stars, was scorched black and coated in a fine greenish dust. The port engine had been sheared off entirely, lying 20 meters back in the trench the crash had carved through the petrified wood. He knelt by the exposed machinery of the fuselage. Wires hung like spilled guts. He needed power. He needed the hyperdrive regulator to be intact, but more importantly, he needed the ship's scrubbers to clear the air if he was going to sleep tonight. He reached into the access panel, his gloved fingers brushing against a severed coolant line. Click, 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 click. The sound in his helmet accelerated like a panicked heartbeat. The yellow bar on his HUD turned orange. Warning, suit integrity compromised. Filter saturation increasing. He pulled his hand back as if burned. He looked at his glove. The leather palm was coated in the same glowing green dust. He wiped it on his thigh plate, but the dust smeared, stubborn and oily. He stood up, scanning the mist. His thermal vision washed the world in shades of blue and gray, but the ground itself seemed to radiate a low-level heat, creating ghost signatures everywhere. He couldn't trust his eyes. He toggled to audio enhancement. The wind howled, a hollow, mournful sound whistling through the dead trees. But beneath it, he heard something else. Not the mechanical whir of droids, nor the organic chitter of native fauna. It was a shifting sound, leather on dry rock, the snap of a twig. He wasn't just stranded. He was being hunted. The hunter's hand drifted to the heavy blaster pistol on his hip. The movement was fluid, practiced. But he paused. In the distance, through the yellow fog, he saw a shape. It was huge, bulbous, floating aimlessly. A two-headed cow. No, that was impossible. The heat shimmer must be malfunctioning. He turned back to the ship. It was a tomb. Staying here meant death by the invisible poison ticking in his ear. He had to find shelter. He had to find parts. He engaged the maglock on his Amban sniper rifle, slinging it across his back. He checked the charges on his whistling birds, full, flamethrower, half-tank. He took a breath, the filtered air tasting metallic and stale, and stepped away from the wreck, walking into the glowing mist. The clicking didn't stop. It just fell into rhythm with his boots, a constant rattling reminder that in this place the air itself was a weapon. The ridge offered no safety, only a vantage point over a world that looked like it had been murdered a century ago and left to rot. The hunter crouched behind a boulder that looked like melted wax. The rock was warm to the touch through his gloves. Below him, the terrain dipped into a cratered valley. The fog was thinner here, revealing the scars of the land. Craters the size of city blocks pockmarked the earth, filled with sludge that glowed with that same vile lime-green luminescence. He checked his wrist comms again. Static, just a wall of white noise. The interference was magnetic, atmospheric, and total. He was about to move, to head toward a distant silhouette that looked like a collapsed tower, when the smell hit him. His helmet filters were advanced, designed to scrub toxins, bacteria, and smoke. But they couldn't scrub this. It was a smell that bypassed the senses and went straight to the hindbrain, the smell of wet, rancid meat left in the sun. It was the smell of a grave that had been churned up. He froze. To his left, 30 meters down the slope, a pile of rags shifted. The hunter zoomed in with his visor. The rags were skin, flayed, peeling skin hanging loosely off a frame that was barely human. The creature was crouching over the carcass of a mutated dog, tearing at the stringy muscle with hands that looked more like talons. It had no nose, just a wet cavity in the center of its face. Its eyes were milky cataracts, blind and weeping. A local sickness? The hunter wondered. A plague victim. He stood slowly, intending to back away. He had no quarrel with the sick. A pebble shifted under his heel, a tiny sound, a scrape. The creature's head snapped up. It didn't look around. It looked directly at him. It let out a sound that wasn't a scream. It was a wet, gurgling rasp, like a lung filling with blood. Hiss! From the rocks around it, 3 more figures rose. They were identical, rotting, erratic, twitching with a nervous energy that defied their corpse-like appearance. "Stand down!" the hunter projected his voice, the external speakers amplifying the command. "I am not your enemy." The first creature didn't hesitate. It launched itself up the slope with a speed that was biologically impossible for something so decayed. It ran on all 4s, then transitioned to a sprint, its limbs flailing wildly. The hunter drew his blaster. Stun setting. He didn't want to kill the indigenous population if he could avoid it. He fired. The blue ring of energy slapped the lead creature in the chest. It stumbled, rolling over the rocks, but scrambled back up instantly, drool swinging from its jaw. Not human. Not anymore. The other three were closing the distance. They didn't move like soldiers. They moved like a flood, reckless and overwhelming. He switched to lethal. Pew! A red bolt took the leader in the shoulder. It blew the arm clean off, spinning the creature around. But it didn't stop. It didn't even scream. It just pivoted and kept coming, the stump of its shoulder oozing black sludge. Resilient, the hunter muttered. The second one was on him. It leaped, covering the last 10 feet in a single bound. The hunter sidestepped, bringing the stock of his rifle down on its skull. There was a sickening crunch, like stepping on a dry gourd. The creature collapsed, twitching. But the third and fourth were flanking him. They were smart enough to pack hunt. One lunged for his legs. He kicked it away, his Beskar boot connecting with its ribcage, shattering bone. The creature clawed at his greaves, its nails scraping uselessly against the Mandalorian iron. The fourth one tackled him from the side. They went down in a tangle of limbs. The smell was overpowering now, filling his helmet. The creature was heavy, dead weight, its teeth snapping inches from his faceplate. He could see the radiation burns on its gums, the madness in its clouded eyes. It wasn't fighting for territory. It was fighting to consume. The hunter jammed his forearm under its throat, holding it back. He couldn't reach his blaster. The creature's strength was manic, hysterical. Waste of time, waste of energy. He triggered the gauntlet on his left wrist. Whoosh! A stream of liquid fire erupted from the nozzle. The flame engulfed the creature instantly. This time it screamed. The sound was high-pitched and human, terrifyingly so. The creature scrambled backward, flailing as the fire consumed the rags of its skin. The heat washed over the hunter's sensors, blinding his thermal view with a wall of white. He scrambled to his feet, checking his perimeter. The one with the missing arm was still crawling toward him. He drew his blaster and put a single bolt through its head. It went still. The burning creature curled into a ball and stopped moving. The smell of cooked rot mixed with the ozone of the blaster fire. The hunter stood over the bodies, his chest heaving slightly. He looked at the ammo counter on his HUD. 4 bolts, half a fuel canister, for 4 sick animals. Inefficient. He looked at his armor. Smears of black ichor stained the silver. He wiped it off, but the stain lingered. This place was sticky. It clung to you. He checked the Geiger counter. It was clicking faster now. The fight had spiked his heart rate, and with it, his oxygen consumption. He needed to move. He needed to find civilization, or whatever passed for it in this graveyard. He turned his back on the burning corpses and began the climb up the ridge, leaving the dead to the glowing dust. The fog began to lift as the elevation dropped. The yellow soup thinned out into a gray, dusty haze that allowed sunlight, pale and watery, to touch the ground. The hunter walked along a cracked thoroughfare of asphalt. The road was ancient, the white lines barely visible, split by weeds that looked like rusty wire. Ahead, a structure cut a sharp silhouette against the gray sky. It wasn't a natural formation. It was a wing, a massive, red, swept-back fin jutting out of a corrugated metal roof. As he got closer, he saw the letters, faded and peeling on the sign. Red Rocket. It was a refueling station, but for what kind of vehicle he couldn't tell. The pumps were bulbous and strange. A rusted hulk of a car sat on 3 flat tires nearby. It looked like a land speeder that had been designed by someone who had never seen aerodynamics. All chrome bumpers and heavy curves. Movement inside the garage bay. The hunter slowed his pace. He didn't draw his weapon, but his hand hovered near the holster. He kept his posture loose, the universal language of "I am dangerous, but I am not attacking." A man stepped out of the shadows of the garage. He was old. His skin was the texture of dried leather, mapped with deep fissures of grime. He wore a mishmash of armor, leather pads strapped over a stained jumpsuit, goggles resting on a bald, sun-spotted head. He held a pipe rifle, a literal piece of plumbing pipe bolted to a wooden stalk, but he held it low, pointed at the dirt. The man squinted, chewing on something that looked like a twig. He looked at the hunter, his eyes widening slightly as they traced the lines of the Beskar armor. "Well," the man said. His voice was like gravel in a mixer. "Ain't you a shiny son of a bitch?" The hunter stopped 5 paces away. "I am, looking for parts." The man spat a brown stream of tobacco juice onto the asphalt. "Ain't we all, stranger? Ain't we all? What are you? Enclave? Brotherhood? You don't look like a knight. Too sleek? No servo motors." "I'm just a traveler," the hunter said. "My ship is down. I need a hyperdrive regulator, or a power converter compatible with a sublight engine." The man laughed. It was a dry, hacking sound that ended in a cough. "Hyper what? Son, you speak in Greek. If it's fusion cores you need, I got one. Maybe, if the price is right." "Fusion core," the hunter repeated. The term was close enough. "I can pay." He reached into his belt pouch and pulled out a comm, a credit chit, solid Imperial credits. He tossed it to the man. The scavenger caught it with surprising dexterity. He turned the gold bar over in his hand, biting it experimentally. He frowned. "What's this? Gold?" "Credits, aye," the hunter said. "Imperial currency, universal standard." The scavenger looked at him like he had grown a second head. He tossed the chit back. It clattered on the asphalt, ringing with a hollow sound. "Useless," the man said. "Too soft to make bullets, too heavy to carry. Can't eat it, can't drink it." The hunter stared at the gold bar on the ground. "It is worth thousands." "Not out here, spaceman," the scavenger said, leaning against a rusted pump. "Out here we deal in caps." "Caps?" The man reached into his pocket and pulled out a handful of small, crimped metal discs. Bottle caps, red ones, blue ones. He jingled them like diamonds. "Nuka-Cola caps, standard currency of the Commonwealth. You got water, I'll trade for water. Radaway, stim packs, bullets." The man eyed the hunter's rifle. "That's a fancy shooter. I'll give you 50 caps for the scope." The hunter felt a cold realization settle in his gut. His wealth was gone. His reputation meant nothing. In this place, he was a beggar in a suit of diamond armor. "I have no caps," the hunter said. "I have water on my ship, but the ship is guarded by the dead." The scavenger's eyes narrowed. "The glowing sea? You came from the sea." He took a step back, raising his pipe rifle slightly. "You verify clean? You tickin'?" "My suit is sealed," the hunter said. "Suit don't mean spit if you dragged half the radiation of the crater with you," the man spat. "You stay back. I got Radex to sell if you need it, but I ain't touching nothing that came out of that green soup." The hunter looked around the desolate station. The wind whistled through the holes in the roof. A rusted robot, hovering on a single thruster, drifted past the corner of the building, muttering about grand opening sales in a distorted, cheerful voice. "I need information then," the hunter said. "Where is the nearest settlement? A place with technology." The scavenger pointed a calloused thumb toward the horizon, where the smog was thickest. "Diamond City, the great green jewel. If they don't shoot you on sight, you might find what you need. But looking like that," he chuckled, shaking his head, "you're gonna be a magnet, shiny man. Raiders, gunners, muties. They're gonna peel you like a fruit just to see what's inside that tin can." The hunter looked at the horizon. I like those odds." "Yeah?" The scavenger turned back to his garage, dismissing him. "Just watch out for the Institute. They like shiny things too, and they don't bargain." The hunter watched him go. He looked down at the gold credit on the ground. He left it there. He adjusted his rifle, the weight familiar and comforting. He had a direction now: Diamond City. As he began to walk, the clicking in his helmet finally slowed, fading into the background static. But the metallic taste in his mouth remained. The hunter walked into the wasteland, a silver ghost in a world of rust. The trek back to the crash site was a study in desolation. The hunter moved with a predatory economy, stepping in his own previous footprints to mask his numbers, though the wind was already doing the work for him. The green fog of the glowing sea had thickened, rolling over the jagged earth like a tidal wave of slow radioactive glass. He heard the ship before he saw it, or rather, he heard the absence of it. When he had left, the N1 had been a dying beast, its sublight engines cooling with a rhythmic metallic tick. Now, there was only the hollow, flat sound of wind whistling through empty cavities. He crested the final ridge of petrified rock. He stopped. The N1 starfighter was gone. In its place was a carcass. The sleek silver hull, handcrafted by Nubian engineers to slice through the atmosphere, had been flayed. The main chassis remained, but the plating had been stripped away with brutal efficiency, exposing the dark, skeletonized frame beneath. The canopy glass was shattered, the shards glittering in the toxic dust like diamonds in a gutter. But it was the engines, the massive chrome-finished turbines that gave the ship its soul, that stopped his breath. They had been severed, not unbolted but torched off, leaving jagged, weeping scars of melted durasteel. The hunter slid down the embankment, sliding on the loose scree. He reached the hull and ran a gloved hand over the exposed wiring. The copper had been ripped out in varying lengths, hanging like eviscerated intestines. Savages. This wasn't salvage. This was butchery. He knelt by the landing gear strutter, or what was left of it. The ground was chewed up, churned into a slurry of ash and mud, heavy treads. Tank treads, no, too narrow. Robots. He traced the impression of a metallic foot in the mud, three-toed, heavy impact. Beside it, a splatter of oil that hadn't come from his ship. He touched the oil, rubbing it between his fingers. It was gritty, low-grade. He engaged his visor's spectrum scanner. Footprints, dozens of them, mixed with human boots. They had swarmed the ship like ants on a sugar cube. He followed the drag marks. A wide, chaotic trench led away from the crash site, heading due east, deeper into the wastes. They had dragged the engines. Then he saw the marker. Impaled on a spike of rebar driven into the ground near the cockpit was a helmet. It wasn't Mandalorian. It was a crude, welded bucket of rust and jagged iron, painted with a red devil's grin. Protruding from the top of the helmet were wires woven through the eye sockets. Rust devils. The hunter stood. The name meant nothing to him, but the intent was clear. This was a territory marker, a boast. He looked east. The drag marks were fresh. The wind hadn't covered them yet. He checked his rifle. The magazine was seated. He adjusted the flamethrower nozzle on his left gauntlet. The anger in his chest was cold, a distinct, icy pressure behind his ribs. They hadn't just stranded him. They had violated the creed. A Mandalorian's armor and his ship were his life. To strip one was to strip the other. He began to walk. The pace was different now. Before, he was a survivor looking for shelter. Now he was an executioner looking for a neck. The sound of metal banging against metal echoed from the hull behind him, a loose panel flapping in the wind. sounding like a broken bell tolling for the dead. The tracks led him out of the glowing sea and into the ruins of the old world. The yellow sky gave way to a bruised gray, and the silence of the desert was replaced by the distant, groaning ambience of a dying city. Scrap Haven. That's what the scavenger had called it. It rose out of the urban decay like a fortress of garbage. The structure was immense, a pre-war stadium, its high concrete walls reinforced with sheets of corrugated steel, rusted car chassis, and spiked barricades. Spotlight beams cut through the gloom, sweeping the perimeter with erratic, jerky movements. The hunter stood at the edge of a crumbling overpass, looking down at the massive green wall that formed the settlement spine. It was painted a chipped, fading emerald, nicknamed by the locals as the Monster. He descended the rubble ramp. The road leading to the main gate was littered with skeletons, not human, but mechanical. Husks of Protectrons and Mr. Gootsies lay in piles, stripped of their fusion cores. As he approached the heavy steel blast doors, a voice boomed from a loudspeaker. It was distorted, crackling with static. "Halt! State your business, Tin Man!" Two guards stood on the catwalk above the gate. They wore armor that looked like a parody of sport, thick pads, catcher's masks, and baseball bats modified with saw blades, but the weapons in their hands were real. Pipe rifles and a heavy laser musket. The hunter didn't stop until he was 10 meters from the gate. He looked up, the T-visor reflecting the searchlight glare. "I am looking for parts," he said, his voice amplified by his helmet, cut through the wind, "and I am tracking a raiding party." The guard on the left leaned over the railing. "You look like Brotherhood, but you ain't got the colors. You a paladin? Where's your squad?" "I am alone." The guards exchanged a look. "Alone? Out here, in that fancy suit?" The guard laughed. "You're either the toughest bastard in the Commonwealth or the dumbest. Entrance fee is 10 caps. "I have no caps," the hunter said flatly. The guard sighed, racking the slide of his rifle. "No caps, no entry. Go hug a deathclaw." The hunter shifted his weight. He didn't reach for his blaster. He reached into his belt and pulled out a fusion cell he had scavenged from the Rust Devil tracks, a small, glowing ammunition cartridge dropped by one of their robots. He held it up. "I have ammo, high grade." The guard squinted. "Microfusion cell. Full charge?" "Full." The gears of the massive gate groaned. Rust flaked off in showers of orange dust as the doors shuddered open just enough for a man to slip through. "Get in here before the super mutants smell you," the guard shouted. The hunter stepped through the threshold. The transition was jarring. Outside was the dead silence of the waste. Inside was an assault of life. Scrap Haven was a shanty town built into the bowl of the stadium. Shacks made of plywood and sheet metal were stacked on atop of each other, climbing the stadium stands like a favela. Lanterns and neon signs buzzed with an electric hum, casting the muddy streets in garish pinks and blues. The smell hit him first, not rot this time, but humanity. Unwashed bodies, stale beer, Brahmin dung, and the savory, salty steam of boiling broth. He walked down the main concourse. People stopped. Conversations died. Eyes tracked the silver gleam of his armor. He was used to stares, but these were different. They weren't looking at him with fear. They were looking at him with appraisal. They were calculating the scrap value of his pauldrons. A robotic vendor in the center of the market square was chopping vegetables with terrifying speed. It was a Protectron, painted red, muttering a phrase in a language the hunter's translator tagged as pre-war Japanese. "Nani shimashoka?" The hunter ignored it. He scanned the crowd. Mercenaries, traders, farmers covered in dirt. A woman in a red trench coat was arguing with a man holding a clipboard near a barber shop. He needed a lead. He spotted a sign, "The Dugout Inn." The letters were formed from old light bulbs. He pushed through the saloon doors. The air inside was thick with smoke and the tinny warbling sound of 1950s swing music playing from a jukebox in the corner. "You, civilization, I'll stay right here." The room went quiet. A few patrons at the bar turned. One of them, a massive man with green skin and muscles that looked like knotted ropes, a super mutant, but seemingly civilized, paused with a glass halfway to his lips. The hunter walked to the bar. The floor was sticky, his boots peeling away from the wood with every step. The bartender was a ghoul. His skin was melted wax, his nose gone, wearing a tuxedo that had been fashionable 200 years ago. He polished a glass with a rag that was grayer than his skin. "Don't see much shiny metal in here unless it's Brotherhood," the ghoul rasped. "And they don't drink, they just lecture." "I am looking for a group," the hunter said. "They use robots. They paint skulls on their armor." The bar went deadly silent. The music seemed to get louder in the void. The ghoul stopped polishing. He placed the glass down gently. "Rust devils," he said softly. "Friend, if you're looking for them, you got a death wish the size of the Pridwin." "They took something of mine." "They take everything," the ghoul said. "They don't just raid, they harvest, they strip tech to build their abominations." "Where?" The ghoul hesitated. He looked past the hunter toward the back of the room. "I can't tell you that. Bad for business. But he might." The hunter followed the ghoul's gaze. In the back booth, shadowed by the overhang of the mezzanine, sat a man in a pinstripe suit. He was eating an apple with a knife, slicing slivers of fruit and popping them into his mouth. "The mayor?" the hunter asked. "The warlord," the ghoul corrected. "Mayor implies we voted." The warlord's office was a monument to contradiction. It was located in the luxury box of the stadium, high above the squalor of the field. The glass windows, miraculously intact, offered a view of the shantytown below. Inside, the room smelled of stale tobacco and fermented fruit. A velvet couch, moth-eaten but opulent, sat opposite a desk made of mahogany. On the desk sat a terminal, its green screen flickering with code, and a revolver that looked like it could stop a charging reek. The warlord, a man named Hancock, no relation to the history books, though he wore a tricorn hat to mock them, leaned back in his chair. He wasn't a ghoul, but he wasn't quite human either. He had the look of a man who had taken every drug in the Wasteland and lived to regret none of it. His eyes were dark, sharp, and entirely devoid of fear. "Nice suit," Hancock said. He gestured with the knife he was still holding. "Beskar? No, that's a deep space alloy. I read old magazines, Steel. Where are the rust devils?" The hunter stood in front of the desk. He didn't sit. Hancock chuckled. He stabbed the knife into the mahogany. "Straight to business. I like that. The Brotherhood usually gives me a speech about technology run amok before they ask for a handout. I am not Brotherhood. Clearly, they walk like they have a stick up their exhaust port. You walk like a predator." Hancock leaned forward, his elbows on the desk. "The rust devils are holed up in the Fort Hagen satellite array. Nasty business. Lots of sentry bots, heavy laser turrets, suicide for a normal man. I am not a normal man. I can see that." Hancock picked up the apple slice. "But here's the thing, Shiny. Information ain't free. In Scrap Haven, we trade. You want coordinates, I want a problem solved." The hunter remained motionless. "I am a bounty hunter. I can pay in service." "Good, because I have a bounty." Hancock swiveled his chair toward the window, looking out at the wasteland beyond the walls. "There's a vault. Number 108. It's about 5 miles north. My scouts tell me it's sealed tight, but the internal sensors say the medical bay is untouched. You want drugs? I want medicine, Hancock corrected. Stim packs, Radaway, antibiotics. My people are getting sick, the water purifiers are failing, and the radiation is seeping into the crops. I need that med bay cleared out and brought here. A retrieval job, the hunter nodded. Standard. Hancock turned back, a grim smile stretching his scarred face. Standard? Sure. Except for one thing. The vault ain't empty. The hunter tilted his head. Squatters. Clones, Hancock said. Or echoes. The records are garbled. Something about a cloning experiment gone wrong. Everyone who goes in here's laughing, just laughing. Then they stop screaming. He slid a holotape across the desk. Bring me the inventory from the clinic. You get the location of the rust devils, and I'll throw in a vertibird signal flare. Might help you haul whatever scrap those devils left of your ship. The hunter looked at the holotape. It was a simple plastic cartridge, archaic and dusty. And if I refuse? Hancock shrugged. Then you walk to Fort Hagenblind. You trigger their perimeter sensors. Their robots turn you into a toaster before you get within a mile. Or you help me, and I give you the access codes to their back door. I have a spy on the inside. The hunter weighed the options. His code demanded he retrieve his armor. His armor was his priority, but walking into a fortified robotic stronghold without intel was a violation of tactical doctrine. He reached out and took the holotape. Vault 108, the hunter said. Gary, Hancock whispered almost to himself. Watch out for Gary. Who is Gary? You'll see. Hancock waved a hand, dismissing him. Get out of my office, spaceman, and try not to drip oil on the carpet. It's pre-war. The hunter turned and walked to the door. The sensory dampeners in his helmet filtered out the smell of the warlord's cheap cigar, but the tension in the room clung to him. He stepped out onto the catwalk. The wind whipped at his cape. Below him the city of scrap churned, a desperate, dying organism clinging to the bones of a dead sport. He had a job. The hunter activated his jetpack. With a roar that silenced the market below, he launched himself over the stadium wall, a silver comet streaking toward the north, toward the laughing vault. Inside his helmet, the Geiger counter began its slow, rhythmic clicking again. Click, click, click. The wasteland did not end. It merely changed texture. The jagged urban ruin of Scraphaven gave way to a vast, undulating plain of scorched scrubland. Here, the earth was not glass, but a brittle, desiccated clay that cracked underfoot like old pottery. The hunter walked with a steady, grinding rhythm. His boots crunched on the skeletal remains of a pre-war highway. The asphalt bleached nearly white by 2 centuries of unfiltered ultraviolet radiation. The wind here was hot, carrying the scent of dry sage and ozone. He was not alone. He had known it for 2 miles. The sensors in his helmet had picked up a faint, rhythmic vibration, trailing 60 meters behind him. It wasn't the erratic shuffle of a ghoul or the heavy tread of a machine. It was footsteps, measured, deliberate. The hunter stopped. He didn't turn. He simply ceased movement, his hand drifting to the blaster on his hip. "You have good noise discipline," the hunter said, his voice amplified by the external speakers. "But your heat signature is running hot." "A cooling malfunction," a voice replied from behind a cluster of petrified elevated rail supports. It was a smooth voice, synthetic, but affecting a noirish, weary cadence. "I've been meaning to get that fixed. Parts are scarce." A figure stepped out from the shadow of the concrete pillar. It was a man, or the approximation of one. He wore a tattered trench coat and a fedora pulled low over a face that was half flesh, half exposed circuitry. His eyes were glowing yellow orbs set in a skull of gray plastic and synthetic skin. "A droid," the hunter said. "Synth," the figure corrected, raising empty hands. "Designation X688, though the locals usually just scream Institute Spy and start shooting. I prefer Valentine models, but we work with what we have. I saw you leave the stadium. I am not hiring companions. I'm not looking for a job. I'm looking for data." The synth walked closer, his movements fluid but slightly uncanny, lacking the micro-hesitations of a biological being. "You're wearing an alloy I can't identify. Your energy readings don't match Brotherhood tech, Enclave, or even Zeta alien signatures. You're an anomaly, and in the Commonwealth, anomalies usually end up dead or dissected." The hunter turned fully, facing the machine. "I can take care of myself. Statistically, doubtful." The synth pointed a mechanical finger toward a ridge of jagged rocks to the east. "You're walking into Yao Guai territory. Mating season. Very aggressive. I have fought worse. Have you fought a mutated black bear with razor claws and a temper fueled by radiation psychosis?" The ground shook. It wasn't a vibration this time. It was a tremor. A low, guttural roar echoed from the ridge, vibrating in the hunter's chest plate. From the rocks, a monstrosity emerged. It was massive, the size of a small shuttlecraft, its fur patchy and mange-ridden, exposing raw, blistered muscle underneath. Its eyes were milky white, but its nose, snout twitching, locked onto them instantly. "Yao Guai," the synth noted dryly. "Probability of survival without heavy ordnance, 12%. The beast charged. It didn't run. It thundered. The clay earth exploded under its paws. The hunter didn't flinch. He dropped to a knee, unslung his Amban sniper rifle, and sighted. The targeting reticle turned red. He fired. Chow! The heavy bolt slammed into the beast's shoulder, vaporizing a chunk of flesh. The Yao Guai didn't even slow down. The pain seemed to accelerate it. "Kinetic shielding advised," the synth shouted, drawing a submachine gun from his coat. The hunter holstered the rifle and activated his jetpack. Whoosh! He shot 20 feet into the air just as the beast slammed into the spot where he had been standing. The impact cracked the asphalt. The synth held his ground, firing a stream of 10 mm rounds into the creature's face. The bullets pinged off the mutated skull like hail on a tin roof. The bear swiped, a backhand blow that caught the synth in the chest. There was a screech of tearing metal. The synth went flying, crashing into the concrete pillar with a sound of shattering plastic. Sparks sprayed from his exposed torso. The beast turned, rearing up on its hind legs to snatch the hunter out of the air. The hunter cut the thrusters. He dropped, gravity taking over. As he fell, he extended his left wrist. Whistling birds. 12 micro-missiles launched from his gauntlet, spiraling with a high-pitched shriek. They slammed into the Yao Guai's chest and neck in a clustered detonation. Boom, boom, boom! The explosion blew the creature backward. It crashed onto its spine, roaring in agony. The hunter landed in a crouch. He didn't wait. He sprinted forward, drawing the Beskar spear from his back. The beast was thrashing, blind and burned, trying to rise. The hunter vaulted off the creature's heaving chest, driving the spear down with both hands. The tip pierced the base of the skull, severing the spinal cord. The beast went rigid, then slumped into the dirt, letting out a final wet exhale. Silence returned to the plains, broken only by the hiss of the hunter's jetpack cooling down. He pulled the spear free, wiping the dark blood on the dry grass. He turned to the concrete pillar. The synth was sitting up, sparks showering from a gash in his side that revealed spinning gears and coolant tubes. He looked at the dead bear, then at the hunter. Probability recalculation, the synth said, his voice static-laced. Survival, 100%. The hunter walked over. He looked down at the machine. Most droids would be deactivated by that hit. This one was trying to reseat a loose servo in its shoulder. "You are durable," the hunter said. "I'm stubborn," the synth replied. He held out a hand. "I'm coming with you. If you can kill a Yaoguai in 10 seconds, I want to see what you do to a vault door." The hunter hesitated. The creed taught caution, but the way also respected strength. And in this strange land, a guide who could take a hit meant for him was an asset. He didn't take the hand, but he nodded toward the north. "Keep up?" The entrance to Vault 108 was carved into a cliff face of red sandstone, hidden behind a screen of dead vines and rusted chain-link fencing. The massive cog-shaped door, stamped with the number 108 in yellow paint, was closed. It looked impenetrable, a relic of a civilization that had believed it could engineer safety. The hunter stood before the control console. It was dead. No lights, no hum. "Mechanism is fused," the synth said, plugging a data jack from his wrist into the port. "Internal power is offline, or rerouted. Can you open it?" "I can bypass the lock, but moving 20 tons of lead and steel without hydraulics, that's a physics problem." The hunter placed his hand on the door. It was cold. He stepped back, looking at the seal. "We do not need to open it fully." He pulled a thermal detonator from his belt. It was a sphere of silver, humming with contained energy. "Stand clear." The synth's yellow eyes widened slightly. "That's a thermal imploder. You'll destabilize the rock face." "I will make you a door." The hunter primed the detonator and clamped it magnetically to the seam of the blast door. He grabbed the synth by the collar of his trench coat and dragged him behind a rusted bulldozer. Thrum, crack. The sound wasn't an explosion. It was a vacuum collapse followed by a shock wave. The air was sucked in, then expelled, with enough force to shatter the surrounding rock. Dust billowed out, thick and choking. When it cleared, the vault door hadn't budged, but a man-sized hole had been melted through the 3-foot steel plating near the bottom right quadrant. The edges of the breach were glowing cherry red. The hunter stepped through the molten ring. The transition was immediate. Outside, the world was noisy. Wind, grit, chaos. Inside, the air was dead still. The tunnel ahead was lined with white tiles and fluorescent lights that flickered with a low, buzzing hum. Bzz, bzz. "Atmospherics," the hunter commanded his suit. "Warning, airborne toxin detected. Unknown hallucinogen. Filtering." "Keep your intake closed," the hunter warned the synth. "The air is poisoned." "I don't breathe," the synth replied, stepping over a skeleton wearing a blue jumpsuit. "But I am picking up high concentrations of aerosolized psychoactives. This isn't just stagnant air. It's a defense mechanism." They walked deeper. The vault was a tomb, but it wasn't empty of signs of life. It was cluttered. Tables were overturned. Papers were scattered across the floor. Hundreds of clipboards. The hunter picked one up. It was a medical chart. Patient name, Gary. Patient name, Gary. Patient name, Gary. He dropped it. He picked up another. Subject 23, Gary, deceased. Subject 24, Gary, hostile. "Gary," the hunter whispered. From the darkness of the corridor ahead, a voice echoed back. "Gary?" It wasn't a question. It was a wet, slurred mimicry. The hunter froze. He raised his blaster. "Show yourself!" A head poked out from a doorway 50 feet down the hall. It was a man with wild gray hair, wearing a tattered blue jumpsuit with the number 108 on the back. He grinned. his teeth yellow and broken. "Gary!" the man giggled. Then another head appeared from the opposite door, identical, same hair, same face, same grin. "Gary!" the second one moaned. Then a third, a fourth. They stepped into the hallway holding lead pipes, kitchen knives, and wrenches. They were all the same man. "Clones," the hunter said, a cold memory of the Clone Wars surfacing in his mind. But these were not soldiers. These were broken copies. "Genomic replication failure," the synth noted, stepping back. "Cascade degradation. They aren't sentient. They're a hive mind of madness." The lead Gary slammed his pipe against his palm. His grin widened, stretching skin that looked too tight for his skull. "Gary!" he screamed. The pack charged. There were 20 of them. They moved with a jerky, synchronized violence. They didn't scream battle cries. They just chanted that single name over and over until the word lost all meaning and became a sound of pure aggression. The hunter opened fire. The hallway lit up with red blaster bolts. Each shot dropped a clone, burning holes through blue jumpsuits. But for everyone that fell, 2 more seemed to crawl out of the vents, out of the floor grates. "Gary! Gary!" One of them leaped at the hunter, knife raised. The hunter caught the wrist, twisting it with a snap of bone, and headbutted the clone. The Beskar helmet met the human skull with a sickening crack. The clone fell, but even as he died, he chuckled. "Gary!" The gas was getting thicker. The hunter's HUD flickered. The edges of his vision began to blur. The yellow bar of the toxin warning was pulsing. "Filters at 80% capacity." "We need to move," the hunter shouted. "Push through." He activated the flamethrower. A cone of fire filled the corridor. The Garys screamed, finally making a sound other than their name, as the flames drove them back. The hunter and the synth sprinted through the inferno, boots splashing in the water from the triggered sprinkler system, heading deeper into the belly of the madness. The medical wing was sterile white, or it had been. Now it was splattered with dried, rust-colored stains that the hunter knew weren't rust. They had barricaded themselves in the main observation room. The heavy blast door was locked, but outside the pounding was relentless. Thud, 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 and the chanting. "Gary! Gary!" "They are infinite," the hunter said, reloading a power pack into his rifle. His breathing was heavy. The air inside the helmet tasted sour. The filters were struggling to scrub the hallucinogen. He felt a phantom itching under his skin. "Not infinite, just numerous," the synth said. He was plugged into the main terminal desk. His eyes were rolling back in his head, rapid scanning data. "I'm accessing the mainframe. The vault security isn't controlled by the clones, it's automated. I can activate the sterilization protocol." "Do it." "I need time. The encryption is pre-war military grade and—" "Wait." The synth paused. "There's a secondary override code entered recently. Someone else is in the system." Before the hunter could ask, the ceiling panel slid open. Drop turrets descended, but they weren't standard ballistic turrets. These were laser cutters. And from the far side of the medical bay, the containment pods hissed open. 3 figures stepped out. They were skeletal, metallic, humanoid robots with singular, glowing red eyes in the center of their faceplates. Their hands were razor-sharp claws that spun with hydraulic speed. "Assaultrons," the synth said, unplugging his jack. "We have a problem." The lead Assaultron swiveled its head toward the hunter. The red eye began to glow brighter, the sound of a charging capacitor whining up in pitch. "Way! Take cover!" The hunter dove behind a heavy steel operating table just as the Assaultron fired. A beam of concentrated red energy, thick as a man's arm, sliced through the air. It hit the table, The steel didn't just heat up, it liquefied. Molten metal sprayed over the hunter's shoulder pauldron. The Beskar held, dispersing the heat, but the kinetic force knocked him backward. The heat was intense. His suit alarms screamed. Temperature critical, coolant loop failure. The second assaultron charged. It moved with terrifying speed, sprinting on hydraulic legs. It closed the distance to the synth in seconds, raising a blade arm. The synth blocked the strike with his submachine gun. The robot's claw sheared the gun in half and sliced into the synth's metal forearm. The hunter rolled out from cover. He couldn't use the flamethrower. These things were heat-resistant. Blaster bolts would bounce off their ablative armor unless he hit the eye. He needed the spear. He stood up, exposing himself. "Hey!" The lead assaultron turned its charging face laser toward him. The hunter threw the Beskar spear. It was a desperate throw. The spear flew true, a silver streak in the fluorescent light. It struck the assaultron in the center of its chest, just below the neck joint. The Beskar tip punched through the armor plating and impaled the fusion core housing. The robot shuddered. The charging laser sound distorted, dropping in pitch. Woob, woob. Boom. The assaultron detonated in a nuclear fireball. The blast wave threw the hunter against the far wall. The glass of the observation window shattered. He hit the floor hard, his vision swimming. The gas was getting in now. The cracked glass let the unfiltered air seep into the room. He saw shapes in the smoke. Mandalorians? No, just shadows. He shook his head, forcing focus. The second assaultron was pinning the synth to the ground, its face laser charging. The hunter drew his blaster pistol. He didn't aim for the robot. He aimed for the hanging light fixture above it. He fired. The heavy industrial fixture sheared off its bolts and crashed down onto the robot. The impact knocked the assaultron off balance, its laser firing wild into the ceiling. The synth scrambled free. He lunged for the terminal again. "I'm rerouting their targeting parameters!" "Hurry!" the hunter yelled, drawing his vibro knife. The third assaultron was on him. It didn't fire, it slashed. The claw raked across the hunter's chest plate. Beskar shrieked against hardened steel. Sparks showered his visor. The force of the blow winded him. He stabbed the knife into the robot's joint, jamming the hydraulics. "Done!" the synth shouted. The assaultron froze. Its red eye dimmed from angry crimson to a passive orange. It took a step back, disengaging. The hunter slumped against the wall, his knife still jammed in the machine's arm. He gasped for air, his lungs burning. "Threat neutralized," the synth said, his voice glitching. "Security protocol. Reset." The hunter stood up slowly. He pulled his knife free. "The supplies. Get them." The synth moved to the storage locker. It opened with a hiss. Inside were crates stamped with the Red Cross symbol, stim packs, Radaway, blood packs. "There is enough here to treat an army," the synth said. The hunter walked to the terminal. He needed to know why this place was a fortress. He scrolled through the logs the synth had unlocked. Entry 11A. Buyer confirmed. Good neighbor Warlord Hancock. Entry 11B. Cargo adjustment. Replace Stimpack Lot 404 with Compound V9. Arsenic derivative. The hunter stopped. He reread the line. "Arsenic," he said. "Poison," the synth translated, looking over his shoulder. "He's not healing his people. He's liquidating them." The hunter looked at the crates. Then he looked at the door where the Garys were still banging, their mindless chanting a backdrop to the betrayal. "The warlord lied," the hunter said. The anger was back, colder than before. "He intends to poison the water supply of a rival gang," the synth read further. "Collateral damage estimate 80% of Scrap Haven civilian population." The hunter closed the terminal. He picked up his spear from the wreckage of the first robot. The metal was hot. but his glove insulated him. "We are taking the supplies," the hunter said. "To Hancock." "No," the hunter said. He looked at the crate of poison. He grabbed a canister of the arsenic compound and crushed it in his hand, the glass shattering against the Beskar. "We are going to have a conversation. He has an army," the synth pointed out, "and a fortified position. I have a jetpack," the hunter said, "and I have the way." He checked his blaster. It was hot to the touch. "Grab the medicine. Leave the poison." The synth lifted the heavy crate with effortless mechanical strength. "And the clones?" The hunter looked at the door. The banging was getting weaker. The fire in the hallway had likely consumed most of the oxygen. "Leave them," he said. "They are already ghosts." They turned to the emergency exit. The hunter led the way, stepping over the slagged remains of the machines, walking back toward the surface, back to the war he was about to start. The toxic air of the vault began to clear as they reached the ventilation shaft, but the bitter taste of betrayal lingered on the hunter's tongue. He had completed the mission, but the terms of the deal had just changed. The dugout inn was louder than before, a cacophony of drunken laughter, clinking glass, and the frantic sawing of a violin from the jukebox. The air was blue with smoke, thick enough to taste. The hunter pushed through the swinging doors. The synth followed, carrying the heavy medical crate marked with the red caduceus. The room didn't go silent immediately. It rippled. The silence started at the door and spread outward like frost across a window pane, booth by booth, until the only sound was the scratching of the needle on the vinyl record. The warlord, Hancock, was still in his elevated booth, legs kicked up on the railing. He watched the hunter approach with the lazy interest of a reptile watching a fly. "You're back," Hancock said, his voice carrying easily over the hushed room. "And you aren't glowing green. I'm impressed." The hunter stopped at the base of the stairs leading to the private box. He didn't ascend. He signaled the synth. The droid stepped forward and dropped the heavy crate onto the sticky floor. Thud. "The medical supplies," the hunter said. Hancock clapped his hands, a slow, mocking applause. A man of his word. Rare commodity these days. Rarer than clean water. He motioned with his chin. "Bring it up." "No." The word hung in the air, heavy and sharp. Hancock's smile didn't waver, but his eyes hardened. "Excuse me?" The hunter reached into his belt and pulled out the single vial he had taken from the shipment. The amber liquid caught the dim light of the lantern above. "This is not medicine," the hunter said. "It is arsenic trioxide, concentrated." The patrons nearest the stairs shifted uneasily. Hands drifted toward holstered pipe pistols and serrated knives. Hancock sighed, swinging his legs down and leaning over the railing. "It's a harsh world, spaceman. Sometimes the only cure for a tumor is to cut it out. My rivals, they're a tumor." "You lied," the hunter said. "I do not facilitate mass murder." He crushed the vial in his fist. The glass shattered. The amber liquid dripped from his glove, sizzling slightly as it hit the floorboards. Hancock stared at the dripping poison. The amusement vanished from his face, replaced by a cold, bureaucratic boredom. "That's unfortunate," Hancock said. "That was expensive." "Where are the rust devils?" the hunter demanded. "The deal is done. I retrieved your crate." "You retrieved it, then you broke the seal," Hancock corrected. "And now you're making a mess on my floor." He stood up, buttoning his red frock coat. "You know, when you left, I made a call. I thought, who pays more for alien tech than I do? And the answer came to me." Hancock pointed a finger at the hunter. "The Brotherhood of Steel. They're very interested in that shiny suit of yours. And your ship parts." The hunter went rigid. You sold the location of my ship. I sold you, Hancock said. They're setting up a perimeter around your crash site right now, and they gave me a very generous finder's fee to keep you here until they arrive. Hancock raised his hand. The silence in the room broke. It shattered. Every patron in the bar stood up. 20 weapons, shotguns, laser pistols, pool cues, taped with razor blades, leveled at the hunter. "Kill the droid," Hancock ordered, turning back to his drink. "Strip the man. I want his helmet for a planter." The hunter didn't wait for the first shot. He kicked the heavy medical crate. It slid across the floor with screeching friction, slamming into the shins of the 3 mercenaries nearest him. They buckled, screaming. "Down!" the hunter yelled to the synth. The room erupted. The first shot was a shotgun blast that took a chunk out of the wooden banister inches from the hunter's head. Splinters sprayed against his helmet like shrapnel. The hunter dropped to a knee, his blaster pistol already in hand. He didn't fire wildly. He fired once, a clean red bolt that hit the shotgun wielder in the center of the chest. The mercenary folded backward over a table. The air filled with chaos. Unlike the precise, disciplined fire of stormtroopers, this was a hailstorm. Bullets whizzed past in erratic arcs. Lasers burned black scorch marks into the walls. The noise was deafening, the booming crack of ballistic rounds mixed with the high-pitched pew-pew of energy weapons. The synth flipped a table, using it as cover. He fired his submachine gun blind over the edge, the bullets traversing the room in a suppressive spray. "Exit strategy!" the synth shouted over the roar. "Up!" the hunter replied. He holstered his pistol and grabbed the synth by the back of his trench coat. He triggered the jetpack. Roar. The sudden ignition of the thrusters was like a bomb going off in the enclosed space. A pillar of flame blasted the floor, setting the spilled alcohol and sawdust on fire instantly. The mercenaries nearest them were knocked off their feet by the sheer thermal pressure. The hunter and the synth rocketed upward, smashing through the rotten wooden mezzanine. They crashed through the second floor, splintering planks and overturning a card table. The hunter didn't stop. He pushed the throttle max. They burst through the roof of the dugout, tearing through the corrugated tin sheets and exploding into the open night air of the stadium. The cool air hit them, a stark contrast to the stifling heat of the saloon. Below, through the jagged hole in the roof, flames were already licking upward. "They are tracking us," the synth warned. From the stadium walls, the spotlights swung around. Beams of blinding white light locked onto the silver figure hovering in the sky. Crack, thump. A sniper round, high caliber. It struck the hunter's left pauldron. The impact was like a sledgehammer. It spun him mid-air, disrupting the gyroscopic stabilizer of the jetpack. "Stabilizer's failing!" the hunter grunted, fighting the controls. Another shot. This one clipped the jetpack's exhaust port. A plume of black smoke sputtered out, followed by a sickening mechanical whine. Whir clunk. The thrust cut out on the right side. They began to spiral. "Brace!" The hunter cut the power to avoid a detonation. They fell the last 30 feet, crashing onto the sloping concrete stands of the upper stadium. They tumbled, metal grinding against concrete, rolling down the rows of old plastic seats that shattered under their weight. The hunter slammed into a concrete divider, stopping his slide. His vision swam. The HUD was flickering with red static. "Thruster damage detected. System offline." He scrambled up. The synth was already on his feet, though his left leg was sparking. "The wall," the hunter said, pointing to the perimeter of the stadium. "We have to go over." With no flight capability, the synth looked at the 50-foot drop on the other side. That is problematic. Guards were pouring out of the lower exits, running up the stadium stairs. Tracers lit up the night, red and green streaks cutting through the gloom. The hunter unslung his armband rifle. He aimed not at the guards, but at the massive cable supporting one of the stadium's old floodlights. He fired. The pulse vaporized the steel cable. The massive light fixture groaned, tilted, and then swung down like a pendulum. It smashed into the pursuing guards, crushing the stairway and creating a cloud of dust and debris. "Move!" the hunter commanded. They sprinted along the upper concourse. The hunter didn't have his jetpack, but he had momentum. He reached the edge of the outer wall. Below, the shantytown gave way to a garbage moat, and then the open wasteland. "Jump!" he said. "My servos are damaged," the synth stated. "I cannot absorb the impact." The hunter grabbed him. "I will break your fall." They leaped into the darkness. The wind rushed past them. The hunter activated the repulsor capability of his gauntlets, not enough for flight, but enough to cushion a localized gravity well. Toom! They hit the pile of refuse outside the wall. It was soft, rotting trash that broke their fall but swallowed them in filth. The hunter dragged himself out of the mire, checking his perimeter. The stadium alarms were blaring now, a mournful siren echoing across the plains. "We are clear," the synth said, pulling himself free. "But they will send pursuit vehicles." "Let them come," the hunter said. He checked his jetpack. The nozzle was bent, the fuel line severed. It was dead weight. "But first, I have a ship to reclaim." "The Brotherhood base is heavily fortified," the synth said. "Without air superiority, a frontal assault is suicide." "I do not intend to assault them," the hunter said, looking toward the distant lights of the airport where the Brotherhood had established their beachhead. "I intend to walk in the front door." "That is also suicide. This is the way." The Brotherhood of Steel outpost at the Boston airport was a fortress of imposing geometry. Searchlights swept the tarmac in rigid patterns. Sandbag emplacements bristled with heavy laser turrets. The distinctive rhythmic thrum-thrum-thrum of a vertibird engine idling on the pad vibrated in the hunter's chest from half a mile away. The hunter lay prone on a ridge of rubble overlooking the perimeter. Beside him, the synth scanned the base with telescopic optics. "I count 4 suits of T-60 power armor on patrol," the synth whispered. 2 knights at the gate, 2 paladins on the tarmac, plus scribes and initiates. The hunter looked through his own scope. The T-60 suits were bulky, tank-like walking machines. They lacked the elegance of Beskar, relying on sheer thickness of plating and hydraulic force. They were clumsy, but they were strong. And there, in the center of the tarmac under a floodlight, was a crate. It was open, inside, gleaming with a polished chrome that shamed the rusted steel of the Brotherhood, were his sublight engine turbines. Technicians in orange robes were scanning them with handheld devices. "They are reverse engineering them," the hunter said, his voice cold. "They are cataloging," the synth corrected. "The Brotherhood hoards technology. They don't invent. They confiscate. They are thieves." The hunter stood up. He adjusted his cape. "Wait," the synth hissed. "What is the plan? Distraction? Sabotage?" "Infiltration," the hunter said. "Stay here. If I do not return in 1 hour, the ship is yours." "I don't know how to fly a Nubian starfighter." "Then figure it out." The hunter moved down the slope. He didn't use stealth in the traditional sense. He didn't crawl. He walked. He approached the western perimeter fence where the shadows were deepest. He cut the chain link with his vibro knife. The metal parted like fabric. He slipped inside. He moved between the stacks of supply crates, his silver armor reflecting the ambient light of the base. He timed his movements with the sweep of the searchlights. Light passes, move, stop, light passes, move. He reached the hangar bay. The door was open. Inside, the cavernous space was filled with racks of power armor suits hanging like empty metal men. Mechanics were welding a chest plate, sparks showering down. The hunter moved along the wall, sticking to the darkness. He needed to get to the tarmac. He turned a corner and stopped. Standing in front of him was a knight in full power armor. The helmet's headlamp was off, but the suit was active, humming with a low-voltage buzz. The knight turned. The T-visor of the power armor stared at the T-visor of the Mandalorian. For a second, neither moved. "Halt!" the knight's voice boomed from external speakers. "Unidentified intruder in the—" The hunter moved. He didn't draw his blaster. He stepped inside the knight's reach. The power armor was strong, but it was slow. The hunter grabbed the knight's rifle barrel, pushed it up, and swept the knight's legs. The massive suit crashed to the concrete floor with a sound like a car dropping from a crane. Clang! The hunter jammed his vibro knife into the soft seal of the neck joint. He didn't kill, he severed the hydraulic line. Fluid sprayed out. The suit froze, locking up. "Intruder!" the knight screamed inside his paralyzed shell. "Sector 4! The alarm klaxons blared. Whoop, whoop, whoop. Red lights began to strobe. The hunter sprinted for the tarmac door. Stealth was over. He burst out onto the runway. The crate with his engines was 50 meters away. "Target acquired!" a voice shouted. 2 paladins in power armor stepped out from behind the vertibird. They raised heavy laser Gatling guns. The hunter dove as the air filled with green laser fire. He rolled, coming up behind a concrete barrier. The concrete exploded into dust as the lasers hammered it. He needed a distraction. He tapped his wrist gauntlet, whistling birds. He aimed them at the vertibird's fuel tank. Screech boom. The explosion rocked the tarmac. Fire engulfed the rear of the aircraft. The paladins turned, distracted by the loss of their air support. The hunter broke cover. He sprinted toward the engine crate. He was 10 meters away. 5. Suddenly, the air around him hummed with a high-pitched whine. The gravity seemed to multiply. His boots slammed into the ground. His arms were yanked downward. His rifle was ripped from his back, clattering to the tarmac. He tried to step, but he couldn't lift his leg. It felt like the planet itself was holding him. Magnetic trap. From the control tower, a massive dish was pointed directly at him, pulsating with blue energy. "Cease fire!" a commanding voice bellowed. The paladins stopped firing. They marched toward him, their footsteps shaking the ground. An elder walked out from the command bunker. He wore a heavy coat over his armor, his face scarred and severe. He looked at the hunter, pinned to the ground by the magnetic field, struggling against the invisible weight. "Impressive alloy," the elder said, walking around the immobilized Mandalorian. "Resistant to lasers, durable against kinetics, and highly conductive to magnetic fields." The hunter strained against the trap. His servos whined. He couldn't move an inch. "I am taking what is mine," the hunter gritted out. "Nothing in the Wasteland is yours," the elder said calmly. "Technology is a danger. It caused the Great War. It nearly destroyed humanity, and we are its guardians." The elder leaned in close, his face inches from the hunter's visor. "We will strip that suit from your body piece by piece. We will catalog it. We will store it. And you will thank us for saving you from yourself." The elder stood up and waved to the paladins. "Take him to the interrogation block. Use the hydraulic spreader if the helmet won't detach." 2 knights grabbed the hunter by his arms. The magnetic field lowered slightly, just enough to drag him. The hunter looked at his engine crate, receding into the distance as they dragged him into the dark maw of the hangar. The thrum of the bass was deafening now, drowning out everything else, except for the clicking. Click, click, click. The radiation from his earlier exposure was spiking, and now, trapped in the heart of the enemy, he was helpless. The hangar doors slammed shut with a finality that echoed like a tomb. The interrogation room was a brutalist cube of concrete and cold iron, vibrating with the subterranean hum of the Brotherhood outpost. There were no windows, only a single strip of harsh fluorescent light that buzzed like a trapped hornet. The hunter sat in a steel chair bolted to the floor. His wrists were shackled to the armrests with heavy magnetic cuffs, and his boots were locked into floor clamps. He was statuesque, a tarnished silver idol in a room of drab olive and rust. Across from him stood the Elder. He wore a thick shearling coat over a battle-scarred chassis of T-60 power armor, his face a map of rigid authority. He paced, the heavy clank hiss of his servos punctuating the silence. "We have analyzed the alloy," the Elder said, stopping to peer closely at the hunter's helmet. "It is not terrestrial. The molecular density exceeds anything in our archives. Even the Enclave's advanced composites fracture under stress tests, where this Beskar merely sings." "It is not for you," the hunter said. His voice was calm, muffled slightly by the vocoder, but his muscles were coiled tight, testing the magnetic hold with isometric pressure. "It is technology," the Elder countered, leaning down until his face was inches from the visor. He smelled of recycled air and old paper. "And technology without oversight is a weapon waiting to detonate. You are a loose variable, walking through a powder keg with a lit match." The Elder straightened. "Remove the helmet." "No. It was not a request. We need to scan the neural interface inside. If you refuse, we will pry it off. To remove it is to break the creed." "Your creed is irrelevant here. Only the codex matters." The Elder gestured to the corner of the room. "Paladin Brandis, the tool." A massive figure stepped out of the shadows. The Paladin was encased in T-60 power armor, painted the dark gunmetal of the Brotherhood elite. He held a hydraulic spreader, a rusted claw-like tool designed to force open tank hatches. The Paladin approached. The floor shook with each step. "Doom, doom. Last chance," the Elder said. The hunter looked at the Paladin. He looked at the hydraulic tool. Then he looked at the Elder. "I challenge you," the hunter said. The Elder paused. "Excuse me?" "Single combat," the hunter stated. "The right of challenge. If I win, I take my ship parts and leave. If I lose, the armor is yours." The Elder laughed, a dry, barking sound. "You are in no position to negotiate. You are a prisoner." "I am a warrior," the hunter said, "and you claim to be knights. Do your knights butcher bound men, or do they fight?" The Elder's smile faded. He looked at the Paladin, then back at the hunter. The challenge had struck a nerve, the vanity of the Brotherhood's chivalric delusion. "Unbind him," the Elder commanded. "Elder?" The Paladin hesitated, his voice booming from external speakers. "Unbind him. He wants a fight. Let's show him the difference between a suit of armor and a walking tank. Paladin, you have the floor." The magnetic clamps deactivated with a sharp click. The hunter stood up, rotating his wrists. He reached for his belt, but his weapons were gone. "Hand to hand," the Elder said, crossing his arms. "Let's see how much that metal protects you against hydraulic pressure." The Paladin tossed the spreader aside. It hit the wall with a clang. He raised his fists. The T-60 servos whined, locking the arms into a combat stance. The fight began not with a flurry, but with a charge. The Paladin lunged, a maneuver that should have been clumsy for 1,000 pounds of steel, but was terrifyingly fast. He threw a right hook. The hunter ducked. The air displaced by the punch buffeted his helmet. The fist slammed into the concrete wall behind him. Crack! Dust sprayed from the impact point. A crater the size of a dinner plate appeared in the wall. The sensory focus of the room narrowed to that sound, the overwhelming, bone-pulverizing weight of the machine crashing into the structure. The hunter didn't try to block. Blocking was suicide. He moved like water, flowing around the rigid geometry of the paladin's strikes. He rolled under a backhand swing, coming up behind the paladin. He kicked the back of the knee joint. Clang. The Beskar boot connected, but the T-60 barely registered the impact. It was like kicking a building. The paladin spun, his leg sweeping out. It caught the hunter in the hip. The hunter was thrown across the room. He slammed into the interrogation table, crumpling it like tinfoil. His HUD flickered red. Impact detected. Integrity, 98%. He gasped. The wind knocked out of him. The paladin was already closing the distance, raising both fists for a hammer blow. "Yield!" the paladin shouted. The hunter looked up. He saw the glowing yellow light on the back of the paladin's armor, the fusion core housing. It was armored, but it was the source. The hammer blow came down. The hunter scrambled forward, sliding between the paladin's legs. The fists smashed into the floor where he had been a split second ago. The concrete floor buckled, sending a tremor through the hunter's spine. He was behind him again. This time he didn't kick. He jumped, grabbing the exhaust vents on the paladin's shoulders. He hauled himself up onto the giant's back. The paladin thrashed, reaching back to grab him. The servos shrieked. The hunter grabbed the fusion core handle. It was locked. "Get off!" the paladin roared, ramming his back against the wall to crush the hunter. The hunter braced his legs against the wall and the armor, creating a pocket of space. The Beskar groaned under the pressure, but it held. He jammed his gloved fingers into the release mechanism. It was rusted, stuck. He channeled every ounce of strength into his grip. Click! The lock disengaged. The hunter ripped the fusion core out. The hum of the T-60 died instantly. The lights on the suit went black. The paladin froze mid-thrash, trapped in his own heavy coffin. The hunter dropped from the suit, holding the glowing yellow cylinder in his hand. It pulsed with heat, a miniature sun. The elder stood motionless. The room was silent, save for the heavy breathing of the hunter and the faint electric crackle of the core. "The fight is over," the hunter said. He looked at the elder. "I am taking my ship." The elder stared at the immobilized paladin, then at the Mandalorian. His hand drifted to the laser pistol at his hip. "You have spirit," the elder said softly, "but you are still one man in a base of hundreds." He drew the pistol. The hunter didn't hesitate. He rolled the fusion core across the floor like a grenade. "Close your eyes!" he shouted to no one. He raised his gauntlet and fired a grapple line at the overhead light fixture, swinging upward just as the elder fired at the rolling core. Boom! The core didn't explode in fire. It erupted in a blast of pure radiation and concussive force. The green flash blinded the room. The elder was thrown back against the door. The concrete cracked. The hunter landed on the catwalk above, shrouded in smoke. He didn't look back. He ran. The hangar bay was chaos. The blast from the interrogation room had triggered a chain reaction of alarms. Sirens wailed, a high-pitched oscillating scream that sawed at the nerves. "Wee-oo, wee-oo!" Orange emergency lights strobed, turning the cavernous space into a disorienting nightmare. Technicians scrambled, dropping tools. Knights ran toward the armory. The hunter sprinted along the upper gantry. His hip throbbed where the paladin had struck him, a deep bruising ache that made every step a jagged spike of pain. Below him, on the tarmac, the crate with his sublight engines sat abandoned. The guards had moved toward the explosion. But between him and the crate was a squad of scribes armed with laser pistols, taking cover behind a fuel truck. He needed a way down. He vaulted over the railing. Without his jetpack, the fall was dangerous. He used the grapple line, snagging a crane hook and swinging down in a wide arc. He landed on the roof of the fuel truck. The metal boom echoed. The scribes looked up. The hunter didn't give them time to aim. He jumped into their midst, a whirlwind of silver and violence. He struck the first scribe with a throat chop, collapsing his windpipe. He grabbed the second by the collar and threw him into the third. He wasn't killing them. They were non-combatants. But he was neutralizing them with efficient brutality. He reached the crate. It was heavy, reinforced steel. He grabbed the handle. He couldn't drag this and fight. Suddenly, the bay doors blew open. Boom! Debris rained down. A shape hovered in the smoke-filled opening. It was a vertibird, but it wasn't flying with the stable, rhythmic thrum of a Brotherhood pilot. It was erratic, swaying side to side, the engines whining in protest. The side gunner door slid open. The synth X-688 leaned out, his trench coat flapping wildly in the rotor wash. "I acquired transportation," the synth shouted over the roar of the engines. "The controls are unintuitive." The vertibird lurched forward, its landing skid scraping the tarmac, sparking a shower of orange fire. It spun, the tail rotor narrowly missing a stack of crates. "Lower the ramp," the hunter yelled, grabbing the engine crate with both hands. "I am trying!" The ramp descended halfway, then jammed. Brotherhood knights were pouring into the hangar now. Laser fire erupted from the far wall, sizzling through the air. Green bolts pinged off the hunter's armor, leaving hot black smudges on the Beskar. He gritted his teeth. He hoisted the engine crate, easily 200 pounds of dense machinery, onto his shoulder. His knees buckled slightly, but he locked them. He ran. He ran through the laser fire, the bolts singing past his helmet. He reached the swaying vertibird. He heaved the crate up onto the jammed ramp. It slid inside with a metallic crash. The hunter grabbed the edge of the ramp and pulled himself up. A laser bolt caught him in the back of the thigh, finding the gap between his armor plates. He grunted, a sharp intake of breath that tasted of ozone and pain. He scrambled inside. "Go!" He slammed his hand against the bulkhead. The synth yanked the stick back. The vertibird shot upward, sickeningly fast. The G-force pinned the hunter to the floor. They banked hard left, smashing through the upper glass windows of the hangar control tower. Glass rained down on them. "Altitude!" the hunter shouted. "I am compensating," the synth replied. His robotic voice strained. "These gyroscopes are misaligned." Below them, the Brotherhood base shrank. Tracers reached up like angry red fingers, but they fell short. The hunter slumped against the crate of engines. He looked at his leg. The flight suit under the armor was scorched, fused to the skin. Blood was welling up, dark and sluggish. But it wasn't just the burn. He looked at his HUD. The radiation warning was back. Dose rate, 40 rads. Cumulative exposure, critical. The fusion core explosion. He had been right on top of it. His stomach rolled. A wave of nausea hit him so hard he nearly retched inside his helmet. His hands were shaking, not from adrenaline, from sickness. "Set course for the cave," the hunter whispered, his voice thick. "We are being tracked," the synth said. "Fly low, use the terrain." The hunter closed his eyes. The rhythmic clicking of the Geiger counter was deafening now, drowning out the roar of the stolen engine. Click, 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 click. The cave was damp and smelled of mold and bat guano. It was a natural fissure in the earth, hidden beneath a collapsed highway overpass miles from the city. The synth had landed the vertibird in a ravine outside, covering it with camouflage netting scavenged from the cargo hold. Inside the cave, a single lantern cast long, dancing shadows against the wet limestone walls. The hunter sat on a crate, his back against the cold stone. He had removed his chest plate and his pauldrons, laying them reverently on a tarp, but his helmet remained on. He was shivering, violent, uncontrollable tremors that rattled his teeth. "Your internal temperature is 104 degrees, the synth said. He was standing over him, holding an IV bag filled with a glowing orange fluid. "And your cellular degradation is accelerating. The fusion core burst gave you a lethal dose." "I will heal," the hunter rasped. He coughed and the sound was wet. He tasted copper. "You will not," the synth stated flatly. "Your physiology is human. You are cooking from the inside out. Your organs are liquefying." The synth held up the bag. "Radaway." "This is a chemical flushing agent," the synth explained. "It binds to the radioactive isotopes in your blood and purges them through the urinary tract and sweat glands. It is painful, but it is the only way." The hunter looked at the bag. It looked like industrial cleaner. "I cannot remove the helmet," he said. His voice was weak, barely a whisper. "I do not need the helmet," the synth said. "I need a vein." The hunter looked at his arm. He had stripped the gauntlet off. The skin was pale, covered in a sheen of cold sweat. The veins stood out, dark and purple. "Do it," the hunter said. The synth hung the bag on a stalactite. He took the needle, thick, rusted and terrifying, and wiped it with a dirty rag soaked in alcohol. He found the vein in the crook of the hunter's elbow. He shoved the needle in. The hunter didn't scream, but he arched his back, a hiss of air escaping his vocoder. The fluid entered him. It didn't feel like medicine. It felt like ice water mixed with acid. He could feel it tracing the path of his veins, a creeping frost that burned as it moved. It hit his shoulder, then his chest, then his heart. His heart seized for a second, then hammered a frantic rhythm. Thump, thump, thump. "Breathe," the synth advised, monitoring a handheld scanner. "The nausea will worsen before it improves." The hunter leaned forward, clutching his knees. He retched, dry heaving. His body wanted to expel the poison, but the poison was in his blood. He felt dirty, violatingly dirty. He was a Mandalorian, a warrior of the stars reduced to pumping scavenged sludge into his veins in a hole in the ground. "The way," he muttered, delirious. "This is not the way. Survival is the only way that matters in the Wasteland," the synth said softly. The machine sat down opposite him, watching the fluid drip. Drip, drip. "Why?" the hunter asked, his head lolling. "Why help me? I am not your maker." "My makers viewed me as a toaster," the synth said, looking at his own mechanical hand. "You viewed me as a companion. You gave me a weapon. You trusted me with your back." The synth leaned forward. "In the Institute, I was Data. Out here, I am Gary? No, I am X6. I am me." The hunter laughed, a weak wheezing sound. "Gary, rest," the synth said. "The fever will break by morning, or you will die. Statistical probability is 50/50ths. The hunter closed his eyes. The cooling sensation of the Radaway was battling the burning heat of the radiation. It was a war inside his own skin. He focused on the sound of the drip. It replaced the clicking. Drip, drip, drip. He drifted into a fever dream of green fog and silver armor, waiting to see if he would wake up. The N1 starfighter looked less like a ship and more like a carcass picked clean by carrion birds. The hunter knelt in the radioactive mud, his chest heaving. The fever from the radiation had broken, leaving behind a cold, hollow weakness that lived in the marrow of his bones. Every movement felt like moving through water. The Radaway had purged the poison, but it had stripped him of his stamina. Spark, hiss. He struck the arc welder against the hull plating. The blue-white light flared blindingly bright against the eternal gloom of the glowing sea. He wasn't performing delicate Nubian repairs. He was scarring the ship. He was fusing the recovered sublight engines onto the frame with ugly, thick beads of molten durasteel. "The alignment is off by 0.4 degrees, the synth said. X-688 was standing by the open avionics panel, his trench coat flapping in the radioactive wind. He was splicing wires with rapid mechanical precision. "It will hold," the hunter grunted. The smell of ozone and burning metal filled his helmet, masking the metallic taste of his own sickness. He finished the weld on the port strut. The metal cooled from angry orange to a dull, bruised gray. It was hideous, a scar on a work of art. "Power coupling," the hunter demanded, holding out a gloved hand. The synth handed him the heavy cable. "This is a bus bar from a pre-war generator. It is not rated for hyperdrive output." "We are not going to hyperspace," the hunter said, jamming the cable into the socket and bolting it down. "We just need orbit." He climbed up the wing, his boots slipping on the slick ash. He dropped into the cockpit. The seat was covered in grit. The glass of the canopy was gone, shattered by the crash. He would be flying open air. He toggled the ignition sequence. Whir. Clunk. The engines spun up, a low guttural moan that vibrated through the chassis. It wasn't the high-pitched sing-song of the N1. It was a rough, coughing roar. But it was power. "Reactor at 60%, the synth called out. "Coolant loop is leaking, but pressure is stable." The hunter slumped back in the seat, closing his eyes for a second. The vibration of the ship was the only familiar thing in this hell. "We have a problem," the synth said. His tone didn't change, but the cadence slowed. The hunter opened his eyes. "What?" "Sensors are picking up multiple signatures, high-band transmission frequencies." The synth pointed to the horizon. "The Brotherhood tracked the fusion core signature from the stolen engine. They are triangulating." The hunter looked at the scope. A cluster of red dots was moving in from the south. Fast. Airborne. And, the synth paused. Seismic activity from the north. Heavy ground vehicles. Combustion engines. The hunter switched his HUD to thermal. To the north, a column of heat signatures. Trucks, modified, jagged, spewing black smoke. And riding on top of them, massive hulking shapes, super mutants. "The warlord," the hunter said. "He wants his bounty." "We are pinched," the synth stated. "The ship requires 10 minutes to charge the sublight capacitor before launch. We have 3 minutes until contact." The hunter climbed out of the cockpit. He grabbed his armband sniper rifle and the heavy satchel of explosives he had prepped. "Continue the charging sequence," the hunter ordered. "You cannot hold off 2 armies," the synth said, looking up at him. "That is a mathematical impossibility." "I do not need to defeat them," the hunter said, sliding down the wing. "I just need to make them fight each other." He walked toward the perimeter. The wind howled, kicking up swirls of glowing green dust. He checked his ammunition. He was low. He checked his flamethrower. Empty. He was tired. He was sick. And he was outnumbered 100-1. He felt right at home. The ridge overlooking the crash site was a jagged spine of rock, eroded by centuries of acid rain. The hunter lay prone in the dirt, the grit of the sand grinding into the joints of his armor. He placed the last thermal detonator under a loose slab of shale. He covered it with dust. It was a crude trap, a kill box. Below him, the N1 sat in the trench, its engines whining as they built charge. It was a beacon calling every predator in the Wasteland. The hunter crawled back to his vantage point. He adjusted the scope on his rifle. Thrum, thrum, thrum. The sound was distinct. Brotherhood vertibirds, 2 of them painted steel gray, banking low over the petrified forest. Door gunners manned the miniguns, scanning the ground. On the ground, 3 squads of knights in T-60 power armor marched in a phalanx, crushing the dead trees under their boots. They moved with the terrifying inevitability of a glacier. To the north, the warlord's column appeared. It was a carnival of rust. Flatbed trucks reinforced with spiked metal plates, engines roaring without mufflers. In the lead truck, a massive super mutant yelled into the wind, waving a sledgehammer made from a concrete block. The hunter watched through his scope. He waited. "They see the ship," the synth's voice crackled over the comms. "Capacitor at 40%. Brotherhood forces are entering engagement range." "Wait," the hunter whispered. The Brotherhood knights stopped. The lead paladin raised a hand. They had spotted the raider column. "Unidentified forces," the paladin's amplified voice boomed across the valley. "This is a Brotherhood reclamation zone. Disperse or be incinerated." From the raider truck, the warlord's voice echoed back on a loudspeaker, distorted and mocking. "Reclamation? That's a fancy word for theft. That metal bird belongs to Hancock." The super mutant on the lead truck roared, slamming his hammer against the cab roof. "Tin men taste like chicken!" The hunter's finger hovered over the detonator. The 2 armies were facing each other with the ship in the middle. The tension was a physical weight, stretching tighter and tighter. The Brotherhood paladin leveled his laser rifle. "Open fire!" Pew, pew, pew. Green lasers sliced through the air, melting the armor plating on the lead raider truck. The raiders returned fire. A chaotic barrage of pipe rifle bullets, missiles, and Molotov cocktails rained down on the knights. "Now," the hunter said. He triggered the detonator. Boom! The explosive charge he had planted on the ridge above the Brotherhood flank detonated. It didn't hit them directly. It shattered the cliff face above them. Tons of rock slid down, crashing into the phalanx of power armor. The discipline broke. The knights scrambled, their formation shattered. "Ambush!" the paladin screamed. The hunter shifted his aim. He targeted the fuel tank of the second raider truck. Pachow! The pulse bolt pierced the tank. The truck exploded in a fireball, flipping into the air. Chaos erupted. The Brotherhood thought the raiders had flanked them. The raiders thought the Brotherhood had used artillery. The hunter stood up, silhouetted on the ridge. He wasn't hiding anymore. He was the conductor of the orchestra. "Charging at 70%, the synth yelled. "I need 3 minutes." "You'll get them," the hunter said. He activated his gauntlet. Whistling birds, the last 4. He fired them into the sky. They spiraled down, screaming, striking the ground between the 2 forces, kicking up a wall of smoke and dust. The hunter slid down the ridge, entering the fray. He wasn't fighting to win, he was fighting to survive the storm he had just summoned. The battlefield was a sensory overload of noise and light. The hunter moved through the smoke like a wraith. A raider swung a tire iron at his head. The hunter ducked, driving his elbow into the man's solar plexus, then spinning to shoot a Brotherhood scribe who was trying to flank him. Green laser fire crossed with the yellow traces of ballistic rounds. The air smelled of cordite, burning rubber, and the unique, sickly scent of vaporized flesh. A super mutant charged through the smoke. "Small man!" The creature was 8 feet tall, green muscle rippling under leather straps. It swung a fire hydrant on a chain. The hunter rolled. The hydrant smashed into the ground where he had been standing. creating a crater. The hunter fired his pistol at the mutant's chest. The bolts burned black holes in the green skin, but the monster didn't stop. It laughed, a deep, rumbling sound. "Tickle!" The mutant raised the hydrant for a killing blow. Suddenly, a red beam of concentrated light struck the mutant in the head. Zap! The mutant's head vanished in a cloud of ash. The body toppled over like a felled tree. The hunter looked back. A Brotherhood knight stood there, his laser rifle smoking. The knight looked at the hunter, then at the dead mutant. For a second, they were allies against the abomination. Then the knight raised the rifle at the hunter. "Surrender the technology!" The hunter didn't argue. He threw a flash charge at the knight's feet. Bang! The white light blinded the knight's sensors. The hunter sprinted toward the ship. The N1 was vibrating violently now. The engines were screaming, trying to tear themselves free of the crude welds. 90%, the synth shouted from the cockpit. He was firing his submachine gun over the rim, holding off a pack of wild dogs that had joined the chaos. But the real threat was descending from the sky. The Brotherhood vertibird banked low, its side door open. A paladin in heavy armor leaned out. He wasn't holding a laser, he was holding a launcher. A fat, bulbous projectile sat in the cradle. Mini-nuke, the hunter realized. His blood ran cold. The paladin fired. The projectile arched through the air with a terrifyingly slow whistle. It wasn't aimed at the ship, it was aimed at the ground in front of it. A tactical denial strike. Whee! The hunter dove under the wing of the N1. Kaboom! The sound was unlike anything else. It wasn't just noise, it was pressure. The world turned white. The shockwave lifted the N1, a starfighter weighing tons, and slammed it back down. The hunter was thrown into the landing strut. His vision blacked out for a second. His ears rang with a high-pitched tone that drowned out the battle. He shook his head, coughing. Dust was everywhere. The ground where the nuke had hit was glass, glowing, molten red glass. A mushroom cloud the size of a building rose into the air. Structural integrity critical. The synth's voice was distorted, glitching. Reactor, unstable. The hunter pulled himself up. The vertibird was circling for another pass. "Launch!" the hunter yelled. "Launch now!" "The path is blocked," the synth pointed. A massive piece of rock, dislodged by the nuke, had fallen across the trench in front of the ship. They couldn't take off. They would clip the wing. The hunter looked at the rock. He looked at his rifle. Useless. "Take the controls," the hunter ordered. "What are you doing?" The hunter jumped off the wing. He ran toward the nose of the ship. He stood in front of the rock. He needed to move it. It weighed 2 tons. He placed his hands on it. He fired his repulsor gauntlets, pushing with maximum output. The rock didn't budge. The vertibird was coming around. The minigun spun up. Brat! Bullets chewed up the ground around him. Sparks flew from his armor as a round grazed his shoulder. "Get out of there!" the synth screamed. Suddenly, a shadow fell over the hunter. It wasn't the vertibird. It was the Super Mutant, the one from the lead truck. He wasn't dead. He was burned, bleeding, and furious. The mutant looked at the hunter pushing the rock. He looked at the vertibird shooting at them. "Stupid bird," the mutant roared. The mutant didn't attack the hunter. He attacked the rock. He slammed his shoulder into it, adding his massive strength to the hunter's repulsors. "Push, little man!" The absurdity of the moment wasn't lost on the hunter. He pushed. The mutant pushed. The rock ground against the stone. It shifted. It rolled. The path cleared. The mutant turned to the hunter, grinning with teeth like tombstones. Now run! The mutant grabbed a piece of debris and threw it at the vertibird, roaring defiance. The hunter didn't look back. He sprinted for the ship. He leaped, grabbing the edge of the cockpit, and hauled himself in. Punch it, Ian. The synth slammed the throttle forward. The N1 surged. The crude welds groaned. The ship shot forward, skimming the molten glass of the crater. It clipped the top of the trench, tearing off a stabilizer fin, but it held. They rocketed upward. The G-force slammed the hunter into the seat. The battlefield shrank below them, the flashes of laser fire, the mushroom cloud, the Brotherhood and the mutants locked in their eternal war. The sky turned from radioactive yellow to bruised purple, and finally to the cold, clean black of space. The hunter looked at the synth. The machine was smoking, his coat riddled with bullet holes. "We are in orbit," the synth said. "Course set for the outer rim." The hunter leaned his head back. He looked at the stars. They were the same stars as always. Calculated chance of survival was 0, the synth noted. "Never tell me the odds," the hunter whispered. He touched the silver ball on the control lever. It was cold. It was real. He was going home. The transition from atmosphere to vacuum was not the smooth, silent glide of a functional starship. It was a violent shuddering, a mechanical seizure that threatened to tear the N1 apart at the seams. Inside the cockpit, the hunter was pinned against the flight harness. The vibration rattled his teeth, a physical assault that blurred his vision. The roar of the sublight engines, those scavenged, welded-on monstrosities, screamed through the hull, vibrating the very marrow of his bones. "Hull temperature critical!" The synth's voice cut through the noise, though it sounded distant, hollow. "Heat shielding is compromising!" The hunter forced his hand forward, fighting the crushing G-force. He gripped the throttle. The metal was hot to the touch through his glove. "Hold together," he gritted out. Outside the canopy, or what was left of it, the bruised purple sky of the Wasteland was fading. The radioactive clouds, the green lightning, the dust. It was all flattening out, stretching into a thin, hazy line of atmosphere. Then the blue, not the pale, sickly blue of an irradiated dawn, but the deep, bruised indigo of the upper stratosphere. And finally, the black. The shaking stopped. It didn't taper off. It vanished. The roar of the wind died instantly, replaced by the humming silence of the vacuum. The violent rattling of the frame settled into a low, rhythmic thrum of the engines pushing through nothingness. The hunter exhaled, a long, rasping breath that fogged the inside of his visor. The air recycler clicked on, sounding loud in the sudden quiet. It tasted scrubbed, metallic, and blissfully free of sulfur. He looked to his right. The synth X-688 was slumped in the co-pilot's acceleration couch. His trench coat was shredded, the synthetic leather flapping weightlessly in the microgravity of the cockpit. Smoke, thin gray wisps, was curling from the joint in his neck. "We are clear," the hunter said. He flipped a toggle, stabilizing the gyroscopes. Gravity well escaped. The synth didn't answer. The hunter turned fully in his seat. The synth's head was lolling to the side. The yellow light in his eyes was dimming, pulsing with a weak, irregular beat. "S6, the hunter said. The machine's head snapped up, a jerky, servo-whining motion. "Status, report. Orbit achieved. Trajectory. Stable. You are damaged. Damage is extensive," X6 replied. He looked down at his chest. 3 bullet holes from the vertibird minigun had punched through the chassis. Sparks jumped between the exposed wires. Power core rupture, coolant loss at 98%. System shutdown is inevitable. The hunter unbuckled his harness. He floated slightly, the artificial gravity of the ship barely functioning. He reached out, grabbing the synth's shoulder pauldron to steady him. "We have repair kits," the hunter said. "I can bypass the—" "Logic error," X6 interrupted. His voice was changing, losing the smooth noir affectation, becoming flat and robotic. "My architecture is proprietary. Institute Gen 3, you do not have the components." The synth looked at the stars wheeling outside the open cockpit. For a moment, the yellow light in his eyes brightened, fixing on the distant clusters of light. "It is clean," the synth whispered. "It is not broken." "It is space," the hunter said. "I calculated the odds," X6 said, turning back to the hunter. Survival was statistically impossible. Yet, here we are. The odds are just numbers. Perhaps. The synth's hand twitched, trying to raise a finger, but the servo failed. His arm went limp. "Data point acquired. The way is a variable that defies probability." The light in the yellow eyes flickered once, twice. The hum of his internal drive lowered in pitch. "System. Hibernation. Permanent," X6 stated. "End of line." The light went out. The synth slumped forward, his chin resting on his chest. He was just a shell now. Plastic, metal, and synthetic flesh. The spark, whatever it had been, was gone. The hunter sat in the silence for a long moment. He looked at the machine that had fought beside him. It wasn't a living thing, not by the creed. It had no soul. It was a collection of circuits and programming, but it had saved him. He reached out and straightened the synth's coat. He crossed the machine's arms over its chest. "Rest," the hunter said softly. He turned back to the controls. The nav computer was beeping. It was asking for a destination. The planet hung below them like a rotting fruit. From this height, the scars were visible. The glowing green crater of the sea, the gray necrotic patches of the ruined cities, the vast brown stretches of dead ocean. It was a world that had killed itself and was still screaming. The hunter looked down at it through the T-visor. He had seen war-torn worlds before. He had seen planets glassed by the Empire, moons cracked by mining guilds. But this was different. This place was a monument to hubris. It was a graveyard that refused to stay dead. He reached for the nav computer console. His gloved fingers hovered over the keypad. Location, Uncharted System 4077. Status, habitable. He deleted the entry. He typed in a new code. Status, quarantine. Class X hazard. Warning, do not land. Do not scan. Do not approach. He locked the file with a biometric encryption key. "Nav computer," he commanded. "Purge flight logs of the last cycle. Scrub the coordinates from the jump history." "Confirm, Purge." "Confirm." He wouldn't let the Guild find this place. He wouldn't let the Empire or the New Republic or anyone else come here to strip the bones of this world. The Warlords, the Brotherhood, the Mutants, they deserved each other. They were trapped in their loop of destruction. To bring outsiders in would only feed the fire. He looked at the dashboard. The silver ball, the control knob from the Razor Crest that he had salvaged and installed on the N1, sat there. It caught the reflection of the distant sun. It was a small sphere of pure, polished Beskar. He reached out and unscrewed it. He held it in his palm. It was cold, heavy, solid. It was the antithesis of the Wasteland. The Wasteland was rust, decay, and chaos. This ball was permanent. It was order. He thought of the scavenger at the gas station. He thought of Hancock and his poison. He thought of the Elder and his codex. Everyone down there was fighting for scraps of the past, trying to rebuild a world that had already failed. He screwed the ball back onto the lever. He checked the sublight engines. The welds were holding. The hyperdrive was offline, but he had enough fuel to reach the trade lanes of the outer rim. He would limp to Navarro. He would get repairs. He would wipe the green dust from his armor until it shone again. But he would remember the clicking. Click, click, click. The phantom sound echoed in his ears, a ghost of the radiation. He gripped the throttle. "Punch it," he whispered to the empty seat beside him. He pushed the lever forward. The N-1 starfighter banked away from the brown marble, firing its thrusters. It turned its nose toward the deep, empty black. The stars stretched into lines of light. And then, silence.